Hello, my name is Andy Jones-Wilkins, and welcome to this edition of the Koopcast. As frequent listeners know, Koop is on a little bit of a break, and he's handed over the controls to Stephanie Howe and me, and I'm thrilled about it. Stephanie's done some amazing podcasts already, and I'm launching part one of a four-part series on what it's like to be coached by Koop. As anybody who's listened to the podcast for any period of time knows, that Jason Koop is one of the top, if not the top, ultra running coaches in the world. And while he spends a lot of time on this podcast talking about the science of the sport and the data of the sport and the experience of the sport, I thought it would be fun, since he's given me the controls, to talk to four athletes who've been coached by Koop or are being coached by Koop, and to talk to them about what that experience is like, how they've kind of navigated that, and what it all means. And so my first guest is somebody who really needs no introduction. I first met her at the 2014 Western States 100. We were about 20 miles into the race. She came up upon me. I knew who she was through the internet and so forth, but when she came up upon me, we chatted for a little while. I told her how excited I was that she was at the race. That 2014 race ended up being my 10th and final finish at Western States, and our guest's first finish. Fast forward about 9 hours later, and I came upon her again. She was on her way down Volcano Canyon. Anybody who's familiar with the Western States Trail knows Volcano Canyon comes at about mile 60, 58, 60. And she had a little hitch in her step. She was moving okay. She was sweating a lot. We chatted again, and I went on my merry way, and she ended up finishing, a little while after me. Just a couple of months ago, she finished her 8th Western States. So between the two of us, from my first run in 2001 and her most recent finish in 2022, we have 18 Western States finishes between the two of us. Koop has a lot to do with many of those finishes, but I'm thrilled this evening to be talking to none other than the Pixie Ninja, Kaci Lickteig. Kaci, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Do you remember that time in the high country in 2014?
Like the back of my hand, yes. I remember hearing your voice coming up behind me. I'm like, there's AJW. I heard all about him, but I've never met him until then.
It was great, and we had a little time to talk. Do you remember the time at Volcano also?
I was like suffering going down. My quads were blown, and you were flying. You're like, it happens to the best of us. You look so smooth.
Well, I was kind of finishing up my 10-year run, and we're going to talk a little bit about the 10-year buckle in a little while. But that was 2014, and I think anybody who is familiar with Koop knows his Training Essentials for Ultrarunning book, and in the second edition, which just came out. It's a beautiful book, by the way. You should buy it if you haven't bought it, listeners. Hardcover. It like in classic Koop style, it reads much more like a textbook than a novel. But you wrote the foreword to that book, and the first line is, "I want to win Western States."
That was
Kaci,
my goal.
Tell me about that. Our mutual friend, Scott Jaime, a great Colorado runner, 10-time a hard rock finisher, wonderful ambassador to the sport. You were chatting with him, and you told him what your dreams and goals were. And he said, well, you got to get in touch with this guy, Jason Koop. And so you did. So how did it go from there?
Yeah, I just remember getting on the phone with him, and we chatted, and he asked me, what are your goals for ultra running? And I basically was straight up told him, like, I'm coming from a road marathon background. So, I've looked into ultras, started doing them, and I've fallen in love. I'm just I don't know how to train for them. And I had these 3 specific goals. And I remember the very first one was, I've heard all about Western States. I want to qualify for it. And, I want to win that race someday. And he's like, well, sounds like we can make this happen, and it'll take time and work, but we can do it as a team. And I was like, you're sold. I mean, I'm like, let's do this. I had one big race coming up, and that was going to be this, my race, Rocky Raccoon, that 2014, to qualify or to get a Western States ticket. And that was my big goal. And that was right when Koop just started to coach me right after that race. And so he legitimately started my Western States saga.
So Coop's been coaching you pretty much continuously for 8 years.
Yes.
And I think that's important for people to realize that the coaching relationship is something that, in the best of all worlds, is a multi-year process. Whether you're an elite runner like Kaci or a mid or back of the packer like most of us, if you want to achieve your goals and exceed your goals in the sport, committing to a coach for the long term is really valuable. So you told Koop that you wanted to win Western States, which is a pretty audacious goal. You had a nice 6th place finish in 2014, that year that we first met one another. You came back in 2015 and got 2nd place. I suspect at that point, having myself been a 2nd place finisher 10 years prior, there's something about being a 2nd place finisher that just ignites the fire.
Yes.
Did that happen? In that 2015 year, was Koop's, were you convinced at that point that Koop's coaching was working?
Yes, absolutely. We had a lot of kinks that we had to work out that first year because he had different techniques and style that I wasn't used to. And so I had to adapt. He had to adapt to me, and we ended up working really well. And that next year obviously showed for it. And what was interesting is like he listened to me and I listened to him. So we were a co-partner team.
Right. And you at the time, and at least until recent years, you were like a 5,000 mile a year runner. And, a lot of, flat running, rolling running. You're a runner's runner, right? And
Yes.
and Western States was a little different dynamic. And, we know where you live. It's, you hit the hills like late in the game typically. But after that 2nd place in 2015, did you guys have and I have not talked to Koop about this. I haven't talked to you about this, but did you have a sit down and say, okay, I got 2nd place in this thing. I'm in my late 20s. I got to grab the ring right now.
What we did, we basically looked back and we looked at what worked, what didn't work from the first year, from the 2nd year. And then we collaborated about what? If we put this piece into this puzzle and this puzzle into this piece and basically got it all worked out, we basically found where my weakest links were. And we worked on those during that next year before 2016's start.
And what were those weakest links?
I had to work on technical skills, and I had to also work on I had to work on downhills. That's what blew me up the first year, totally. And then trying not to blow up I always blew up right coming into Michigan Bluff, and I knew I had to fix that because that took a lot of time where I could be running. And so once we kind of keyed into those components, we found that if I can work on those areas, I would be pretty solid, because I knew once I hit Forest Hill, if I can have legs going down the river, I was ready to.
Yeah, anybody looking at the race would know, a pure runner like yourself, when you got to Forest Hill, and especially when you got to Green Gate, you were going to be in the hunt. I know for those of us who were sort of looking on, 15 was my first year of being a spectator at the race and a volunteer. And then 16, the year you won, I was like a spectator / pacer, crew. But it was clear that you had improved the two things you mentioned, the downhills and the long gradual climbs. Did you do that through training? Did you do that through like even more volume than you normally do? Or was Koop was it like the Koop magic special sauce to just kind of make it better? Because, you were a outstanding endurance athlete in 2012, 2013. You just became a specific to Western States athlete in 2015 and 2016.
Right. What really benefited me was going to the Memorial Day weekend camp and getting on the trail, getting more experience on the trail. And Koop got me into that, like, do volume versus mileage, like get out of that mindset of, miles for miles versus more volume and vert. And so we got into more doing long vert training runs versus long distance training runs. And that really helped my legs build up that, endurance I needed for the long climbs, which I don't have here. And just getting used to those, settling in for the duration of however long that hill is or the mountain is.
Right, and I think it proved to Koop that he had this theory in the back of his head that you don't need that much time in specificity to adapt to specificity, and like your experience and a couple of his other athletes, and I know it's extended now recently to my athletes, like going to that 3-day weekend on Memorial Day. I mean, on the one hand, it seems so little. It's just 3 days in the grand scheme of, 180-day training cycle, but it's huge.
Yeah.
And not only, you obviously you get the training benefit, but as you and I know, as people who love the Western States course, you also get this is what I've talked to Koop about. You get the vibe of the Western States course. You get there's an aura around that place that when you show up there on Memorial Day, you don't have the pressure of the race, but you can still sort of absorb that aura. So even if you're only running 70 miles and going from Robinson Flat to Forest Hill and then doing Cal Street and then you're doing it in the context of, in 5 weeks, I'm going to do this in the race. And I think there's an art and a science to those kind of training camps that really, I saw them work for you. And then you might do a decent, like a double long run on the first weekend, the weekend after that. But pretty much your work is done at that point.
Right. Yeah. If you can come out of that feeling good, you're really set up yourself for a great Western States.
And what I've seen out of you, Kaci, is I sometimes think, you obviously run with joy at Western States like I did for all my years, but you almost run with more joy on Memorial Day weekend because you've been every year for, I don't know, the last 10 years, right?
Right. Because I didn't go the first year, which I kicked myself in the butt for not going, because now I've just grown with the family and the community. It's just so fun. I love everybody there.
So 2016, the year you won, we'll spoil it. Kaci won, but you had a battle. It was an early battle, right? Devin went out pretty quick. There were a couple, Lucy Bartholomew went out pretty quick, I think, if I remember correctly. And you were doing your thing. You wanted to run sub 18. You, in a perfect world, you would have been in the low 17s, but like the race took on a life of its own, and you were in first place probably earlier than you thought. How did that feel?
I just still couldn't believe that I was in the lead. I just knew someone was going to come back up and catch up with me. And so I never believed I was going to win until I crossed No Hands Bridge. And so that whole time I just had that pressure behind me, just that little bit of a push to keep me on fire and to keep me on my toes so that I didn't mess up and didn't make mistakes. And I just made myself remember, don't make stupid mistakes, basically, and just keep running. And
was Koop out there?
Oh yes, yep. He's out there every year for me.
Right, but was he there at like Green Gate or like late?
He was I remember at Forest Hill seeing him, and then I can't remember. I saw him again, and he basically said like you have a 45-minute gap on the next one. If you just do what you're doing, don't get in your head, just keep running, just run. And that's what I love, is that it gives me that sense of calmness. Like I get in my head and I'm like, panic, gotta run faster, and it's like, no, you don't do that. Just listen to Coop and just do what you're doing. You're doing everything that you can do to make this successful. You can screw it up by going faster, or you can just do what you're doing and continue happy.
One of the things, it's interesting you mentioned that, because one of the things that I've admired about your the relationship that you and Coop have, and this is what you said a few minutes ago when you were working out the tweaks in the early months of your relationship, is that, and Coop preaches this, and I do too as a coach. There's not Coop does not want you to be dependent on him, and you don't want to be dependent on him. But at those right moments, at the right time, when he can say the right words, whether it's in the race or in training, you're there for one another. And I think in this in the world we live in right now, there's a lot of people who just want to be told what to do. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And one of the things I've always admired about the relationship you guys have and the way in which, like you managed the 2016 race, is it was like, yes, you had his voice in the back of your head, but you also knew what you could do. Like you knew you got second the year before, and you knew like if it played out right and you had done your training right and you'd hit everything right, you were going to win. And then it was just a matter of making it happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think do you feel like you have to work on the relationship, or is it just kind of the way it is now that it's, 8 years old?
I feel like we've grown as a team the whole time. Like we can collaborate. We don't even have to like basically talk every day or every other day. It's like, he'll message me on my runs and I get what he means, and I'm like, okay, you know what he's going to say if you do something stupid, so don't do something stupid. And you know, it's just like I've learned a lot from his experience and how, I've grown as an athlete also. And so, yeah, our relationship is amazing how we just kind of know each other really well now.
Yeah. So then let's go to the 2017 race. You're the defending champion. You had a decent buildup, but as sometimes happens at Western States, it turned out to not be your day. And I was there. Coop was there. A bunch of other people with cameras and stuff were there, and you rolled into the river.
Did not roll. It was more like, let's just kind of make our way there.
So to the listeners out there, Kaci arrived at the river, and I mean the cheerful Kaci that we all know was like way out the back. And you were making the like signal across your neck. You were like, I'm done. Your skin even had a little kind of green color to it. I mean, you were done. And you sat your ass down in a chair and tell us what happened.
That was the very first time I've ever sat at a race in a chair. So I knew things were south very, very soon. I was having the biggest pity party I can ever imagine having. So yeah, going into that race, I had a lot of stress on my shoulders, not only from being past champion, trying to become another champion 2 years in a row, but then I had like family stress going on, and it was you know how they say, you know, pressure can make diamonds. Well, this diamond burst and did not become a diamond. I literally crumbled into bits and pieces like burnt coal because I was done. I sat there, I contemplated life of like, why am I doing this? I don't know how many times I looked down at my yellow wristband and I'm like, I don't want to cut it. And then the other person on my shoulder was like, yes, you do. You just walked 8 miles to the river and that was a slog and you don't want to walk 20 some more miles. So I was having this like Jekyll and Hyde conversation in my head, but the community around me, you, Koop, Miguel, and just everybody that was sitting there, like, I knew I did not in my heart want to quit. So, however, or whatever hours it was like an hour when she comes down and Stephanie Case comes down there strolling along as happy as a lark, flops down right beside me, opens up this McDonald's, eats McDonald's, and she's just like, yeah, what are you doing here? And she was like, just floored that I was there. And I'm like, yeah, I am too, but this isn't what it is, and I'm quitting. And she just didn't, she was just like not having it. She's like, you're not quitting. You have 2 legs, you're gonna walk. And she drug my ass out of that chair. She marched me down to the river. I got in the boat, and that's one of our famous sayings is get in the boat. Got in the boat. I still was reluctant. I'm going to hike up to Green Gate and I'm going to quit is what I said. I remember that. And well, once I got up Green Gate, I'm like, I got a new life in me. I have a second life. Stephanie gave me it. And everybody down at the river is cheering me on. And you know what? We're going to see what happens. And I'm going to keep going. And lo and behold, that year I was the first bronze buckle finisher at 24:02. And you know what? I'm damn proud of that buckle. I can't believe I did it.
I remember that because I got to announce your finish.
Yes.
It was a really nice moment. As listeners might not know, I sit in the booth from about the 24-hour mark to the 27-hour mark or so that John Mettinger can get a nap. And we were up in the booth. I usually get there at like the 23:30 mark, and of course there's people plowing in, and we were getting data on your finish, and Mettinger was like, oh, it looks like Kaci's going to be pretty close. And then we realized that you were going to be a little bit over 24. And he was like, screw it, Andy, you announce Kaci's finish. I'm going to go down there and give her medal in person. And he did. And you might remember he was down there. He was there to meet you. And I got to announce your finish and talk about the experience you had at the river and getting back up off that chair and getting it done. I will say one of the things that was most noteworthy for me as an observer was how calm Koop was in that moment. Mm-hmm. And Miguel too. For those listeners, Miguel is Kaci's longtime training partner and pacer, and knew when they arrived at the river crossing that Kaci was in trouble and probably wanting to quit. So it was a real team effort. But what I found so remarkable in the calmness that both of those guys had was you see so many people when they're confronting a runner who's thinking of dropping, of being frantic about it. Mm-hmm. And Koop was very calm about it. I mean, he wasn't going to let you drop. I mean, he wasn't going to let you grab a pair of scissors and cut your wristband off. But he was also respectful, as was Miguel, who's run, God, thousands of miles with you, was respectful of the place you were in at that moment. And then when fast forward 5 hours later and you're coming around the track sprinting, I mean, heck, if it was been a 120-mile race, you probably would have been top 10. But that's an incredibly proud bronze buckle finish because of what you did and how you did it. And I think it was a good example of, you had to do it yourself, but the people you surround yourself with most notably Miguel and Koop in this case, and Stephanie, who was like the circumstantial,
The gatekeeper.
the gatekeeper, and Chris Thornley, who was down there at the boat, and he was like, "Get in
Yes.
the boat, we're getting out of here."
How can you say no to Chris?
You can't say no to Chris. So then we've got to fast forward. So you've had 8 Western States finishes up until today. You had your 8th this year. But I think it's important that we talk about what you've been through in the last 12 months, because I'm guessing that we're recording this on October 1st, 2022. I'm guessing on October 1st, 2021, you were not thinking that you'd be finishing your 8th Western States this past June, were you?
I never let myself say I was never going to finish it. So I've never believed I wouldn't be there, because I was going to do my best to get there one way or another. But I knew it was going to be a long, hard road to get there. And I was willing to put in the work.
So share with us what actually went down as you went into kind of an injury spiral that ultimately resulted in pretty significant surgery, not that far out from Western States.
Yes. So last year, I struggled all last year, and I didn't know what was going on. And I continued to race. I raced, and my final race was going to be Rio de Lago. So I finished that race barely, because I had done something significant to my hamstring during the race, which had been plaguing me all year. So it just kind of sealed the deal there. I finished that race. I already had a doctor's appointment scheduled to look at my hamstring, because I figured something's going on. Got the diagnosis the end of November, basically, and they said you have had basically a partially 50% torn hamstring that's been retracted to about 2 centimeter or inches from your butt bone, where it inserts at where your butt is. So I've been basically dragging a leg along the whole year, and I had no idea why, because your body compensates so well. And he said the only way that you're going to be able to run healthfully, is to have surgery. And it's going to be a surgery with one of the longest recoveries that we do. And that kind of like, oh crap. And so he said, well, our soonest we can do this surgery would be in January. And I asked him straight up, I go, can I run 100 miles in June, at the end of June? And he counted it, and he said, well, knowing you and knowing your background, I believe you can do it, but it has got to take a lot of patience, and you've got to take yourself out of race mode. You can complete something like that, but I don't believe ever you should race it. Well, lo and behold, I got lucky, and my surgery got moved up to December 22nd, so that gave me more time. I was so scared. I've never had surgery before, and never had something where basically for the first it was 12 weeks, I couldn't do anything, basically. I was going to be on crutches for 3 weeks, non-weight bearing, partial toe touch weight bearing. And then from there on, it was going to be the slowest progress to get back to walking even. So I made a goal with Koop. I said, Koop, my doctor said if I recover smartly, I am allowed to run Western States. And so we collaborated, all 3 of us together, to figure out the best way for me to rehab from it. I kid you not, I started running, I think it was like very end of March, and this is like running as like 3-4 miles, jog. It hurts like crap to run. I did something stupid, and Koop told me not to do it, but I signed up for to pace a friend on a marathon on May 1st. He said, don't do it. It's going to be too soon. And I was reluctant to give back I want to give back to others. So I said, I already committed to this. So I ended up running a marathon with my friend, and I was out for like 2 weeks because it blew my hamstring and everything up. And then I thought, I'm done. I can't run Western States because I can't run 2 weeks now. and who knows if it's going to happen again. So then I had already signed up for the Memorial Day camp, and I decided it's either now or never. I'm either going to do this camp and it's going to go well, or I'm going to do it and it's not going to go well, and then I know there's no way I can run 100 miles. I went through camp. I'm not going to lie. I struggled during camp with I've not been on trails. That was my first trail experience since this surgery and since Rio del Lago, basically, and my longest runs. So my longest run was 26 miles, which was the marathon, and longest time on the feet was 5 hours before I went into Western States this year. So that was my training. I literally that was it. It was all going to be heart and soul and just believing in myself to finish this race. So when I got to Western States, I just made it in my mind that you're going to take it 1 mile at a time. Koop had talked to me. He's like, I know you can finish this, and I know you're going to finish this. And he always gives me that sense of calmness. No matter what, I just feel like when I talk to him, he settles my nerves. He gives me like that headspace I need to do what I need to do. And I always, no matter who, he's my coach, he's my friend, but I always want to honor him, and I want to honor him as an athlete and a friend, and I want to do my best for him because it makes you feel good when you do good for like your coach and for others. So I wanted to make sure I didn't screw it up. And here I go. I finished faster than I did in 2017, finished in 23 hours this year. And so I didn't get top 10. So now I'm at that point of I've got to work again to get back into Western States for next year. And like I did last year and the years before, I'm going to work my ass off again.
Well, what a great story. I will say, I mean, Koop, he came to your house. He came out to your house.
Well, he was there right as I got out of surgery.
As you got out of surgery. I mean, for listeners out there, this is not your normal, like when you sign up for a coach, they come to your house when you get out of surgery. But this is the kind of relationship you guys have forged over now the years. And I think part of the reason, though, Kaci, is because you're a unique person. You're not just sitting there. I mean, yes, you probably should have listened to him and not pace the friend for the 26, for the marathon. But you had your reasons for doing that. And he also knew, Koop also knew, I feel this way with my athletes. He knew I can only push so hard with Kaci, right? But what I saw, I mean, we saw each other for the first time this year at Western States at Michigan Bluff, which we've now seen each other at Michigan Bluff every year. You've run it since I have stopped running it. And you just said, I feel great. It's just slower than all the other years, which I was like, well, it's okay. You knew you were going to be slower this year than all the other years, and you're going to get it done. I think, though, what I saw happen to you this year is, and I don't want you to take this the wrong way, and I'm going to get a little emotional here, but I saw you become a veteran this year. Like the year in 2017 when you got out of the chair, and and I think being a veteran at Western States is something that no one decides you're a veteran at Western States. You earn it. And what you did in this year's race is you earned the credibility to be like a veteran Western. I'm not saying when you had 5 finishes, you weren't a veteran, or when you won. I mean, hell, I never won. So, I mean, you have a cougar, I don't. But what you earned this year in this 8th finish was that kind of that special status that also acknowledges that this race, we can say what we want about all the other races, UTMB, Hard Rock, all the other races, but this race stands alone in the pantheon of races that are just special to certain people and make certain people more special. And what I think happened to you this year and got you out of the chair in 2017 is that phenomenon. And I think you have Koop to thank, but I also think you have yourself to thank and your willingness. And we're going to talk in a second about, what it's going to take to get back there. But, your willingness to say, I want to get back to that. I mean, nobody in their right mind who's doing 3 and 4 mile runs in March is thinking they're going to finish Western States at the end of June. I mean,
No.
nobody. but you were. I mean, and so the magic of the race, and it got into you, and there's no denying that. And so, Kaci, you're sitting on 8 finishes. I think anybody listening to this podcast knows that the opportunity to get 10 finishes at Western States is fleeting at best. There are fewer and fewer opportunities to do that. I know it's something that's probably, I don't want to, would you say 10 Western States finishes is at your top of your list of goals?
It's the number one plus.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So for anybody listening, you need to know that once Kaci gets her 9th finish, she gets a bye for her 10th finish. That's one of the nice things Western States does. I remember benefiting from that in 2013 when I was like, oh my gosh, thank God. Now I get a free pass. But you've got to get that 9th finish. And we know people who've taken multiple years to get to the point to get that 9th finish. Now, I know you're coming down here to the desert where I live. I can't wait to see you, by the way. It's going to be awesome to see you.
Yay,
here at
Javelina.
But how are you feeling going into Javelina in 4 weeks?
Well, I may have been absent of Strava for a while because I blew myself up again. So I keep doing that. So a couple weeks ago, I kind of strained my hamstring the week 1 again. So what did I do? I was actually smart. I stopped running and I did cross training. And this last week, I just started running, basically trying to get my feet back under me. And today I can say I completed an ultra for those of you who are wondering. I did get it done and I'm happy with it. My hamstring's happy. So we're back on fire again.
and I mean, we're recording this on October 1st, so you've got 4 weeks till Javelina, and you've never been like a long taperer anyway. I mean,
Exactly.
Someone who does the volume like you're not going to be a long taperer. So I mean, you'll probably, and you've run Javelina before, had success out here. I love the fact that there's 100-mile golden ticket races now. I'm sure you do too. It's a lot easier than trying to hammer a 100K with a bunch of kids. But I mean, are you feeling? So how is? I mean, in terms of, again, getting back to what it's like to be coached by Koop, how's he managing your training and expectations going into this? Because, I mean, I know, Kaci, I know you well enough that if you get 4th place at Javelina, you're going to be signing up for Black Canyon or Bandera or something else so that you can keep trying to do it, right? So, how's Koop managing that part right now?
Right now, we're just focusing basically one day at a time. He's just, coming back. He checks in. How are you feeling? Let's progress to this. And he, I know what he would say. Let's do litmus tests is what he calls them for runs. And then, so once we get back on track, I feel like we're going to be fine again. It was just me being a little overzealous, which I do that. And I'm stubborn to, I have to blow myself up before I stop. So that's something I'm notorious about doing. And he knows how to push me back into setbacks and get me back on track again.
Well, so as someone who's been a friend of Koop for a long time, and I mean, hell, I'm on his podcast. He's stubborn too.
Mm-hmm.
He's just stubborn in a little different way. The problem with Koop is he is usually the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
And, and it's hard to fight that, you know what I mean? But someone such as yourself, I mean, you've got experience on your side. you might be like, well, geez, Koop, when did you ever get top 10 at Western States? Do you ever like flip the script on him, or are you just like, no, I'm not going to do that?
No, because I know he's always right and I'm wrong because in past experience, I'm always like, why didn't you listen to Koop? That's the exact same thing I did this last time. I was like, you pushed yourself and you didn't listen to Koop again. And you're like back in the hole. So it's me being just a little, I push myself a little extra. And if I would just stay the course, I'd be fine.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to finish with the topic that is near and dear to our heart, which is the Western States 100. I think anybody who knows me listening to this podcast knows that like my passion for Western States is unlimited. And as I've watched you over the years, yours is too. And I feel there's something really kind of sweet and nice about the fact that we met each other when I was running my last one and you were running your first one, and you've made it, as you said, your A+++ goal to get that 10th finish. Whether it comes in 2024, which we all hope it will, or sometime after, it's going to happen. But what I guess I have to ask you, I have my own answers, but I don't often get a chance to ask people of the same level of passion that I have to this question. But what is it? You and I have both run a bunch of races, all kinds of races around the world. What is it about this race in California, from this mountain town down to this little dusty, valley town, it's pretty. There's parts of it that are pretty, but there's parts of it that aren't that pretty. It's dusty. It's always hot. It's like, what is it, Kaci, for you now, having traversed that course 8 times, won the race, been second at the race, scraped by with just over 24 hours at the race? What is it about Western States that keeps you wanting to come back?
It's like it's the chapters of my life that I live there. Like I live, breathe, think about this race daily. And it's not just the race itself, it's the experience of all my memories I have on it. Meeting you, and like I felt like that moment you kind of passed a little baton to me, and to like, I don't know, I just felt that spark and this special aura in my heart. And it just grew from that moment of like starting that race and all the friendships, like making my very first race. I made a, pack with Nick Clark when we were struggling up 6-minute hill, which is like 12-minute hill. We were both struggling and we made a pact that we were finishing no matter what. And like, that race compared to the next ones where I was with Magda for a while, and just all the people that are part of the community of volunteers, they feel like I go from family reunion to family reunion down the trail every year, and it gets stronger and stronger. And so just like this year when I didn't think I was going to make it, now I'm going to cry because the first time I took steps on the trail for camp, I just started crying because it means so much to me to be there. And I know it's silly because it's a race, but it's not just a race. It's something more deep and it. It's something you can't really explain, but it's like part of you. Once you've been part of it, it becomes part of you. And I have such love for everyone and everything about it. And I don't know, like this, you talking with me about it, nothing else really gets my heart to cry. Like I'm not emotional. I don't really cry a lot. And this is something I'll cry about because it means everything to me.
Well, I didn't mean to make you cry, but
No,
I will say, I will say that this year, this year I had the opportunity to just, because of my life, I was able to stay a couple of days after the race and get out and run on the trail. And, just go for little, 5-mile runs and stuff. And I even felt that emotion. I just went down across No Hands Bridge, or, went part of the way down to the El Dorado Canyon. And I mean, it really does, for those of us who understand. And this is kind of why I brought it up, Kaci, is because, there aren't a lot of people who understand the aura of Western states. I mean, there are the people who've done it, for years, and the people who volunteer every year. But there's an aura to Western states that, I mean, I think there's on the one hand, there's this massive desire on the part of the public to get in and check it off their bucket list and everything else. And I love that. It's great for the race. It's great for the event. But then there's also people like you and me who, when Craig said, and he was pretty point blank, AJW, you've got your 10th finish. I hope you don't ever expect to plan on running it again, because, you're not going to be able to. And of course he was joking, but I also realized like my time of running the race was over, but my time with the race was far from over. Right. My time of being there, and in the 7 years I've been going since I've stopped running it, I mean, it's been every bit as meaningful as the times I was running it. But for me to see in you, and I appreciate the passing of the baton, but in order for somebody to pass the baton, the receiver needs to be willing to receive the baton. And I couldn't think of a person more willing to receive that baton than you, and the way you carried yourself the year you won the race, the way you carried yourself the year you were ready to drop and got off the mat, and especially the way you carried yourself this year when you knew right from the get-go, I mean, silver buckle is about all it's going to be. I mean, I'm sure you got to certain places along the course and it was like a little bit darker than it's been in other years you've run it, right? I mean,
Yes.
that happens, as and that's okay. And the fact that you paid honor to the race, you respect every little bit about it, I mean, that says a lot about the grip the event has on you and me, but also the kind of person you are. And so I hope to see you at that starting line in June in 2023. And if you get that finish, you can have a victory lap in 2024.
Maybe I'll find someone to pass the baton again to. We'll just keep going down the trail.
I remember talking to Tim Tweetmeyer about that when he was, I mean, wasn't 10, it was 25 for him, but that was a different
amazing.
era. But he was just, he and I ran, his 25th was my, I think, 5th or something, but he ran the race with that kind of attitude. Like, I'm doing this for the last time. I'm going to thank the aid station volunteers. I'm going to do that. So, I think, Kaci, you get it and you understand how powerful Western states is and what a force it is. But if you were to I like to talk about the mystique, the history, the competition, that it gets in your blood. But like, as a parting word, what it's going to, whether it's at Javelina where you're going for the golden ticket or some later race, what will it be, aside from being at that starting line? What is it about Western states that's going to make you like go that extra bit?
Just like you said, to honor and be there and to uphold the standard of Western states and what it is to the running community and to us.
Yeah. Yeah. It's bigger than any one person or any one idea. And I'm so happy, Kaci, that you get that. I think Koop gets it. And this is Koop's podcast, so I got to give him a little shout out for being there for you. I, for one, can't wait to see you circle that track for number 9, and way more can't wait to be at that finish line when you get number 10, because I know you will.
And we're going to make some buckle selfies.
we're gonna have lots of buckle selfies. But Kaci, this has been a wonderful time to chat with you. I know that that you're a person to whom running, anybody who looks at you, it looks like running comes so easily to you. And it doesn't always, does it?
No, not at all.
I mean,
but it's in the heart.
there are times where it's more work than you wish it was.
Definitely. Cross training is work.
Oh my God. Yeah. Going into the gym and getting on those machines and everything else.
Yes. But it's all part of the process to get to your goals.
Yeah. So everybody tuning in this evening, thank you so much for being here. Kaci, thank you for being our first guest on the What It's Like to Be Coached by Koop podcast series that Koop is probably regretting handing over the controls to me. But fortunately, he's also handed over half of the controls to Stephanie, and she has really responsible guests like Jessie Diggins, the Olympic gold medalist, who's going to be on next week. And I can't wait to hear that. And I know Koop will be back in November, and the Koopcast will live on and be a great addition to all of your various podcasts. But Kaci, on behalf of all of us who've been running for a long time and who love to hear you talk and hear about your passion and hear about you just getting it done day after day, in the Midwest, in without a lot of glamour, with a full-time job, with a lot of other stuff going on, you just keep getting it done. And I think I speak on behalf of all of us that we admire that and hope to see you in circling that track in Placer High in fourth Saturday in June, or it might even be into Sunday, but that'll be okay in June.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Koopcast with guest host AJW. Can you think of a more infectiously positive person than Kaci Lickteig? What a wonderful opportunity it was to spend an hour with her, talk about her relationship with her coach, her experiences with ups and downs, with injury, and her love and passion, which of course I share, for the Western States 100 and the Western States Trail. So hope you enjoy it, and stay tuned for the next episode of What It's Like to Be Coached by Koop, coming up in a couple of weeks. Take care. Bye.